Sup guys, it's Jeff, and today I'm going to talk about some awesome boss fights. I've often said on my personal channel that boss fights have always been my favorite part of any game. From one-on-one duels to epic clashes of armies, nothing gets my adrenaline going like a contest of skill and brutality against the game's more powerful adversaries. So today I'll be sharing a few of my personal favorites with you. Let's take a look. Alright, so let's start things off with a pretty basic one that has a special place in my heart. Rez from Gex. Rez was my first final boss, and I had the hardest time getting to him, let alone beating him. I remember failing a million times on the two lead-up levels. They had the most hazards, enemies, and the tightest platforming in the game. Not the easiest thing to deal with on the old 3DO. The worst part was that if you lost all your lives to Rez, which I did many times, you'd have to go through it all over again. Suffice to say, 8-year-old me was not having the best time. The boss fight itself is pretty easy, but it's structured just right. It tests you on the key mechanics and hazards that you've practiced throughout the game's 5 worlds, such as quick wall crawling to avoid a static blast and eye lasers, quickly platforming across exploding TVs while being chased by the sides of the screen, eating fly power-ups and knowing when to use it to shoot and when to use it as an extra hit based on Rez's patterns, tail bouncing on Rez to avoid laser walls altogether, the works. All that, coupled with Rez's epic techno layer and music that's both atmospheric and gives you that stay on your toes and keep moving feeling, makes this boss one that I want to revisit over and over. Also, gotta give bonus points for the corny robot laugh. Next up is another bit of nostalgia that I think more people can relate to. Possessed Riku from Kingdom Hearts 1. The setup for this one is actually pretty sweet. Two friends and longtime rivals, Sora and Riku, get separated when their world is destroyed, and both go on a quest to save their friend Kairi. Sora becomes a hero of light, and Riku becomes an emissary of darkness. Eventually, their paths cross in Hollow Bastion, and Riku is possessed by the enigmatic Ansem, who wants to use Kairi's heart for his own evil deeds, and even descends towards our hero in dramatic slow motion. Then it's an epic one-on-one duel for the heart of the princess. Literally. I, actually can't believe how many years it took for that pun to sink in. Huh. I love me some duels, man, and this fight is just a back and forth of striking, dodging, and riposting each other's attacks, all to one of the game's best tracks. Well, except for when you're hiding by the computer to avoid a super attack, and, using Ars Arcanum when he blocks like a smartass.
Show me your power!
A fun fight to be sure. And I think pretty much everyone has had the same experience with this fight when we first played Kingdom Hearts. You fight Riku, you repeatedly die, probably when trying to heal yourself, and you end up sitting through this 3-minute cutscene over and over to the point where you're just angrily mocking the dialogue like a child. Whoever you are, they can't go. Getting back his heart. Oh, but first, you must give the princess back her heart. In China, it hurts. Oh my god, sorry. Don't you say that? The princess's heart is pounding, and it's been there all along. Kairi's heart rests within you, so I guess you're technically a Time Lord or something. If you're gonna put out a game like Undertale, where you don't have to fight anyone, naturally there's gonna be people who fight everyone. And if you're gonna go around being a villain, eventually you're gonna have to deal with a true hero. And that hero is Undyne the Undying. Hot damn, is this a great fight. Up to this point, you've been one-shotting your way to the top. You've laid waste to 3 areas of the game, and you're pretty much resting on your laurels. But then, as you hit Undyne and you're awaiting those sweet, sweet execution points, she comes right back and unleashes a bullet hell and DDR storm fury that'll knock you down an exponential amount of pegs. Just keeping track of all the arrows, well, spears, on the screen and what order they're coming in on its own is a Herculean task when you don't know the patterns yet. And the addition of those tricky yellow arrows that flip around and hit the opposite side in this high-stress fight just adds insult to injury. But what I find especially cruel and hilarious is that the fight starts off like the normal Undyne fight from the neutral run. Okay, bit faster, but I can handle it. Then she blacks out the sun with arrows like the Persian fucking army. It's fun, though. It really is. For me, it was one of those fights where I actually had to retry it again and again, getting just a little bit farther each time until I finally fried this fish. Doesn't help that I didn't pick up the ballet shoes in Waterfall my first time, making the battle last even longer, so I had to take even more abuse. But when I finally did beat her, I got that feeling of accomplishment that I hadn't felt from beating a boss in a long time, because I actually had to work for it. Then she takes that away from you by telling you that while you've been fighting her, Alphys has been evacuating the underground and you've been wasting all your precious killing time on one target. Well, you can't have a list of bosses without running into at least one multi-stage fight, right? This here is the Dark Yabu, and he is an asshole. Dude and his army of wraiths whipped, beat, and enslaved Vex's people, and Yabu imprisoned his father and his amulet, feeding off of his pain and misery. So this final fight is the climactic end of Vex's rage-fueled quest for vengeance, and I'd say it's a fitting one. So what are the stages? Well, the fight starts off with the Dark Yabu summoning hordes of wraiths. Now, throughout the game, wraiths hid from you, only striking when your back is turned just long enough. Here, they'll rush you in a bloodthirsty swarm. Some of them do drop health, but you only have 6 hits for the entire fight, and the health orbs only pop up in the first stage, so it's best not to get too cocky. The strategy I use to avoid damage while whooping ass is to run into the horde, uppercut, ground slam, then do an air kick on the way down to make room for my landing. The kick's also good if you need an extra second to change direction, which really comes in handy when he starts throwing fireballs into the mix. Oh, and if you're like me and you're one of those smartasses that tries to run around the wraiths and go right for him, he'll slow you down to a crawl so the wraiths can eat you alive while he teleports like a bitch! After beating up his minions for a while, Yabu absorbs his remaining wraiths and, in typical bad guy fashion, becomes a giant spider monster. This part is actually pretty challenging your first time through. He's got AoE attacks of varying sizes, sets the arena on fire with fireballs, and has a quick swipe attack that opens them up for your attacks. Some of his attacks do 2 points of damage, which can be devastating when you're not used to the fairly vague range of his AoE attacks. One little slip and bam, third of your life gone. So there's a pretty big punishment for not being on your toes, which I like. Give some adrenaline to the battle. Another cool thing about this stage is that the music uses the leitmotif of the Summit of the Sages, which is the main theme of the game, which gives it this nice climactic feel, like everything you've been through has really led up to this epic moment. It's a musical device in games and movies that I just love to death. But then you eventually knock away his amulet and use its power to reflect his attacks back at him, destroying the stage piece by piece until the final blow is struck. No real skill involved in this section outside of a little timing, but it's a hell of an epic visual and it gives that empowering feeling of turning the tables on him. Overall, it's a great fight and a great way to end the game. And now, for the boss everyone is expecting to see, the one notorious for being insanely difficult, Sans. Sans the skeleton. Undertale. Yeah. Shit. But yeah, 2 Undertale bosses in one video. It's almost like I'm trash or something. So where Undyne's fight in the Genocide run was where the playing field was evened, Sans' fight is where the tables are completely turned on you. The whole game you've been squashing monsters like ants. In this fight, you are become ants. He dodges each and every attack no matter how perfectly you time your button press. And even though you can't touch him, the fight will not progress until you swipe at him in vain. If you heal, you face another barrage without getting any further in the battle. This fight punishes you for healing. And it's a hell of a punishment too. The other fights don't progress when you heal either, but what makes that stand out here, in addition to the feudal attack option, is how insane his attacks are. They switch back and forth between two flavors of pain. When he turns your heart blue, you don't just have gravity like with the Papyrus fight. Your jumps and falls are sluggish and awkward, like you're fighting for control over your cursor. And while you're like this, you have to endure arduous 2D platforming challenges that are very similar to Geometry Dash and Super Meat Boy. But when he's feeling merciful and allows you free range of movement in your red heart form, the attacks switch to a deceptively simple game of dodge the blaster and gets increasingly more intense the further into the fight you are. It's really just a matter of knowing where your heart is, knowing when to move, and knowing where the next Gaster Blaster is going to fire. Not too bad at first, but it gets pretty hectic as the blasters become faster, more frequent, and get wider blasts. And the blade-filled cherry on top of all of this? No invincibility frames. Every millisecond you're touching a blast or a bone, your health is draining. A single slip-up can strip you of almost all of your health as you frantically try to recover. When I did this fight for the first time on my personal channel, it was physically exhausting. Oh, but Jeff, I hear the uninitiated say, just take a breather between attacks, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, they strip you of that. Toward the end of the fight, he actually attacks you on your turn. All of your options are covered in moving bones. You are never not moving once you get past the bogus offer of mercy halfway through the fight. Incidentally, him killing you if you accept his mercy is a beautiful bit of karma for what you did to Papyrus earlier in the game, and I love it. Oh, and in case you get comfy with the patterns in his attacks, in the last third of the fight, the screen will black out several times during each of his turns, and the attack will completely change each time it does. And look, I love the theme of this fight. Megalovania is catchy and fits Sans really, really well, but with how out of hand this madness gets, especially with his final barrage, the only song that comes to my mind is In the Hall of the Mountain King. Only that song, cliché as it may be at this point, sufficiently portrays the frantic madness that is the finish line of this fight. And in a show of fourth wall breaking brilliance, it ends with Sans' final attack. Doing nothing. He knows you can't attack on his turn, and eventually he won't be able to dodge in time. So he decides it'll never be your turn, tells you to give up, and takes a nap. And the best part? The way you beat this is by using your cursor to push the box into the fight option and hit him while he's asleep. Fucking brilliant. This fight was a contest of endurance for me. Never has a boss fight physically exhausted me and caused me so much stress that I bit my cheek to the point of bleeding without realizing it. True story, not an exaggeration. The challenge of this fight made me hate my favorite character so much that I did not want to put my controller down until I saw his super depressing death scene. I never, ever want to replay this fight again. And for all the right reasons. I love it. It's fucking beautiful. So those are all the boss fights I have for you guys today. Enjoy the video, leave a like, share it with friends, and subscribe if you want to see more. Have an awesome boss fight of your own? Let us know in the comments. And hey, David and I also have personal channels where we do gaming stuff. Go check them out. If you want to support our content on here and on our own channels, consider donating to us on our Patreons. And with all that shilling out of the way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. But before the video actually ends, I'd be remiss not to give an honorable mention to a very special boss fight. One that I think touched all of our hearts, one that may not have been the most challenging in the world, but carried a deep significance to all of us on at least some level. One that was such a perfect end to such a long, tiring journey, filled with good food, bad laughs, and great friends to see us through. So, let's give an honorable mention to My hat from Jeff and the Wild Hat Chase. I mean, having my own game was cool enough, but then I got to fight a giant sentient hat on top of a cathedral and then in space. And after that, we team up against an evil alien captain in a duel to the death on top of his intergalactic spaceship. That's pretty fucking rad, dude. Good night!